So next Sunday, we're going to have a great celebration. Not only will we welcome Adam as deacon and soon to be priest in charge, we will also welcome newly baptized, confirmed, and received members of our family. Newly received members of the people of God. 2 will be baptized. Their names are Phoebe and Cricket, and they are children. I think they're 6 and 8 or something like that. Not infants, but school age, and both are really excited. I've already heard about Cricket and Phoebe, to be honest. And they're very honored to be baptized. And I think there's a lot we can learn from the enthusiasm of children about baptism. Some will be confirmed, and some of those have come from the Baptist church, and that's not, of course, unusual in these parts since we're immersed, no pun intended, immersed in Baptist piety and politics and spirituality in these parts. In the Baptist church, baptism happens in middle school or even in teenage years or maybe even adulthood. And it's the result of a conversion experience. And it's a celebration of that conversion experience and their belief. The impetus comes from an experience, the impetus to be baptized comes from an experience in which the one to be baptized witnesses to their own encounter with Jesus, the action of Jesus in their hearts, and their own setting forth on a new way. The person has been born again. And that's such a beautiful idea. Because I think it speaks to our hunger for God, for our hunger for an experience of the spirits in the midst of our everyday lives. Because our everyday lives, they can be difficult sometimes. There is sickness, for example. There is chronic pain in the back and joints. There's heart disease and kidney disease and the dreads of cancer and dementia. These are all realities that I encounter every day, realities in our own lives. And we also can experience fear and frustration. We might be afraid to lose our jobs. Some people are afraid they're going to lose their homes. We might be afraid of the world's conflicts and wars and whether they might be growing out of control. We may be watching wildfires in Spain and France and Canada and worrying about the changes to our climate. We might be worried about our children and grandchildren and the world they will inherit. We might be worried about Phoebe and Cricket. And there's also suffering closer to home. There are realities of abuse and family instability. There's crime and drug addiction. These things are all true. And Paul knows it because he wrote this letter to the Romans in which he lists his own stuff. He says, who's going to separate us from the love of Christ? Will hardship or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? No, he says. Because what is also true is this. There's some leaven in my refrigerator. Actually, it's now on the countertop. And it's sourdough starter. And that was probably the type of leaven that people used in the ancient Near East. They didn't really have the powdered yeast in packets that we got. They used kind of more like this sourdough starter. Leaven is a fermenting agent. And nowadays, of course, it can be dried yeast, or it can be sourdough, or other things. And that stuff is amazingly resilient. I don't know how often I forgot to feed it. And yet, I would always go back and there'd still be bubbles in it, and I would realize it was still alive. And then there was bubbles last night, because it's been a while since I fed it. A sure sign that the leaven was working. One day, it will make bread. And that bread will be shared. And maybe there'll be some friendship or community formed around that bread. Because life is like that too. This is also true of life. We share bread together. We have community. We have friendship. Leaven is kind of invisible. It sort of works in secret. It works best in cool and dark places, in the unseen places. But it makes things rise. It brings a kind of life to what can seem broken and dead. There were times when my sourdough starter looked dead. But lo and behold, it would rise again. There is hardship, there is distress, but there is also life. And that is what baptism speaks to us about. The elements of water and oil and light bathe the newly baptized and proclaim that even in this body, even in this world, we can be made new. And now that doesn't mean that the body becomes not a body. This isn't a magic trick. This isn't even that stuff they call like biohacking. Have you heard of biohacking? Some of you maybe. We aren't maxing this or that. Have you heard about that? Maxing. Baptism doesn't give us perfect abs, nor does it ensure us many years of life. It does none of those things. Because creation is still creation. And there is birth and there is death. And there are groans from creation that Paul spoke about just a few verses before. And groans, they come from creation and they come from our bodies. Baptism does not get rid of that. But it celebrates that God's light, God's Spirit, God herself has come to be with us, is for us, walks beside us, is in us, is one of us. And if that is the case, who can be against us? Who can separate us? Who can isolate us? Who can ultimately imprison us? No one. No thing. No created thing. No visible thing. No invisible thing. No angel. No demon. No addiction. No experience. No feeling. No hardship. No loss. No discrimination. No penalty. No sickness. Not even death. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. That is our hope. That is what we live by. That is what baptism is about. When Phoebe and Cricket, the newly baptized, turn and we welcome them with applause, and the other confirmands and those received turn and we welcome them with applause, they will not look different. They will not look changed. Maybe they'll smile a little more and their dresses will be prettier. But their lives will still unfold like lives unfold. They will still grow up. They will still suffer. They will grow older. They will still have hardships and they will still have celebrations. And there will still be death and there will still be birth. And yet amid all of this, they are new. God does not show up as huge changes usually. Many times God's entrance is quieter. and smaller, like a mustard seed, which is the smallest of seeds. In the Middle East, the type of mustard seed, the type of mustard plant that is grown, can grow very tall, up to 10 feet. But its seeds look like little particles of dust. It's quite amazing. If you are used to even those larger seeds that you get for pickling and things like that at the grocery store, it's amazing the potential energy in those seeds. It's miraculous. How can a whole tree grow from such a tiny thing? It's that miracle that Jesus compares God's kingdom to. A place of great energy and dynamism, but it begins small and hidden. In fact, it may indeed begin in contradiction. One commentator, this is all the way back to the Middle Ages, the 12th century or something like that, said the mustard seed was a symbol of the cross. The parables that we're reading about this morning come in the midst of conflict in Jesus' life. The authorities have begun their plot to kill him, and still he teaches. Because when God shows up, it can often be in times when we feel depleted and exhausted, when we feel like death has gotten the upper hand, when there's a shadow in our lives, and it feels like the shadow will not go away. In our prayer for birthdays, there's this great line. I've always liked it. Lift them up when they fall. For to me, that is where God shows up. God shows up in Simon of Cyrene, who carries the cross for Jesus on the way. For every centurion that carries a whip, there is a Simon who carries the cross. God shows up in Veronica, who wipes the brow of Jesus in the legends of the Stations of the Cross. For every king or queen demanding the head of John the Baptist, there is a Veronica. For those who will be baptized, for you who have been baptized, for those who will be confirmed or received, for you who have been, this is a celebration, and it's also a call. When you see another stumble, lift them up. Be the leaven. Believe in the mustard seed. Believe in the resurrection of life from the dead. And proclaim with Paul this morning, there is nothing that can separate us from the love of God. Amen.